brought to you by Accenture Extended Reality. This is Field of View.
Hello and welcome to Field of View. My name is Nick Rosa from Accenture.
And my name is Daniel Coliani from the Academy of International Extended Reality.
And the guest that we have today at Field of View is a very special friend of mine and somebody that is very close to my heart because we've been in touch for the last probably 20 years. He's a true veteran of the gaming industry. And at Field of View, we're interviewing people that are working in the digital entertainment and the Metaverse industry and the virtual reality and augmented reality industry. It's a pleasure having on this episode of Field of View my friend Victor Lucas. Hi, Victor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and this is a real thrill, and I'm honored to be here. I don't think you and I have ever done a podcast together, Nick.
No, this is the first time that we're on camera together, which is weird because, I mean, we met 20 years ago?
30.
30 years ago?
I think that was
sorry. About 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm confused. I'm confusing how long I've been together with my wife with when we got married, which was about 20 years ago, and when we were working on distribution for our show in Italy, you and I connected around that because you found out about Electric Playground.
Absolutely.
And then you helped us with getting married. My wife and I got married in Venice. But my wife and I have been together for 30 years, and I felt like you'd been a part of that friendship since the very beginning.
It's
As you get older, the dates get a little more confusing.
I saw Nick's face when you said 30, and then Nick was like, "I'm not that old."
Not yet. Very soon. But so it's a pleasure having you here, and I think that's for our viewers and for our listeners on the different platforms, a little bit of an introduction of yourself would be great. I mean, if you can introduce who you are, what do you do, and then we're gonna deep dive a little bit about your origin story and where your passion for digital entertainment comes from and how this translates in the future of entertainment in immersive technologies like AR and VR. So Vic, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm a lifelong fan of video games, and I was also an actor, and I wanted to kind of marry the idea of production around games and video content around video games um, uh, with a little bit of behind the scenes. And so I created a TV show called The Electric Playground in the mid 90s. And it took us a couple of years before we actually launched on air across Canada and down the west coast of the US. And we were one of the first ones out there that went behind the scenes every week and started to interview developers on location where they were building all these games, because I felt like there was this innate curiosity from me and from millions of gamers out there that wanted to know more. And so we launched in 1997 as a weekly TV show and kept going and ended up making 2 daily TV shows. Electric Playground spun off a show called Reviews on the Run. It was known as Judgment Day on G4 in America. I created a bunch of documentaries and worked with lots of incredible people and traveled the world. And that's been my business life, has been documenting and covering and critiquing video games and virtual reality games. And also it's moved over into entertainment and stuff. I'm a movie critic and a pop culture critic in a way, and a commentator. But I've been, I had a dream and a passion for this, and with the help of my wife and many other incredible people that have helped me along the way, I've been able to just live the dream. It's been really, a wonderful career, and I feel very lucky.
And you work with some true names in the industry. I mean, Tommy Tallarico,
Sure.
which is a common friend, of course, was your partner
Yep.
on all the Electric Playground episode, most of the Electric Playground episodes. And then you work
Yep.
with Jade Raymond, that's obviously went
Mhm.
producing Assassin's Creed, but also Geoff Knightley, that is like now the host of the Video Game Awards. I mean, big names that came in and out of your shows. I mean, and right now, what are you doing today? What is happening in your life, in your career?
Well, obviously the television industry has just been changing radically, right? And we had been a 25-year television brand, and we were really tied in delivering a half-hour TV show to the air.
Yeah.
And so we weren't ready for a digital pivot when we left the air at the end of 2015. And so we didn't have like another solution. We didn't have another broadcaster. I, I don't relish the idea of anybody working at any TV network right now, as more and more people are cutting cables and moving to internet streaming sources and all that stuff. And we were just set up to be a TV show. So we had to pivot in 2016, shrink down, utilize the digital video platforms like YouTube and Twitch, and really kind of get up to speed with delivering regular content. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, is making tons and tons of video content on YouTube and Twitch, but using the television disciplines and all of the relationships that I have. And we were building some really cool things prior to the pandemic that were a great stretch for me. We were actually making a live show in the middle of downtown Vancouver, which is where I'm based, and we were having live studio audience and guests coming in from all over the world. Working in partnership with the Vancouver Film School. It was great, and then the pandemic hit, and so we had to not do live shows anymore and not do any of that stuff. And I had to pivot again to producing everything kind of on my own out of the basement. But through Zoom and all kinds of other technology, I've been able to kind of keep a consistent pace of covering the games industry, having discussions like we're having right now with game makers and filmmakers. I had Simu Liu, the star of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, on my show last year, through Zooms. And that's kind of the way the world has been. But it's surreal to me that I have been able to sort of ride these different waves. And my experience and my day to day has kind of remained the same. I play tons of games and I talk to tons of people that make video games. And I just don't get on planes now. I haven't been on a plane in a couple of years. I haven't been traveling and visiting all kinds of studios like I had been for a long time. But for the most part, what I do and what Electric Playground is doing now has been consistent. It's just been this platform to uh, dive into the behind the scenes and to kind of pick apart and get into the nitty gritty of all of this incredible entertainment.
So Victor, like let's take it back, because I
Hmm.
think one of the really key parts of the show is all about the origin stories as well, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
you're sitting in your bedroom, presumably as a young child, thinking about
Yep.
what you want to do in the world, what do you want to do in the future. I mean, like, how do you get from that position to some of these really amazing things that you are doing today?
It was surreal, and one of the things that I can absolutely say is that the video game industry, and I think it's still true to this day, and I would imagine that the metaverse industry, the VR AR industries are kind of like this as well. It's filled with brilliant people that are open to entrepreneurs and passion in its pure form. And that's exactly what I discovered. So I was 27 and my wife and I, she was my girlfriend at the time, were on a trip in Mexico. And we were both working as waiters, and we decided to be vagabonds and live in Mexico for 6 months. And we were traveling around. But I had this kind of midlife crisis. We were on this long bus ride through Mexico, and I was like freaking out about what I was going to do and who I was going to be by the time I was 30. And I really didn't want to just be a waiter in this restaurant, looking for acting gigs. And I thought about a million different things, and I was just kind of flipping out. And I realized, wait a minute, there's a way to tap into this passion that I've always had around production and gaming. Let me pursue this. And so when we got home, I wrote down 100 different ideas for different types of businesses that we could possibly start together. And the one that I zeroed in on was this TV show concept, even though I'd never produced anything before. But I knew that there was going to be some interest because I had this interest, and I was collecting all the magazines through the 80s and 90s about video games, about how video games were made. And that's the one that kind of made the most sense to me. And I came up with the brand of Electric Playground, and I thought, okay, this is kind of open-ended. It doesn't scream that it's only for video game players. This is about, creativity in some way, some form of expression. And then I just started taking business meetings with producers in the Vancouver area. And I started calling, because really email was, pretty primitive back then. It was the mid 90s. And we started to think about a website. We launched our website in 1995. We were one of the first video game websites in the world. It was all on a gray background back then, so we we couldn't. There was no color, and I was making the little graphics for the different sections of our website. But I reached out to game creators like David Perry, who was running Shiny Entertainment, and
which
he
is a
had
great
written
friend
an
of yours,
article.
and
Yeah,
Tommy.
he's a great friend, and Tommy. Although I met them individually, but yeah, they're best friends. It's so crazy. But I reached out to David Perry, and if you guys remember, in the Europe, there's a great magazine called Edge, which focuses on
Yeah.
game culture and everything. And then in America, North America, a magazine called Next Generation came out that kind of mirrored a lot of the thinking from Edge. And David Perry had written a letter for the second issue of Next Generation about why is there no television content around games and how games get made. You can watch a whole channel around golf. And so I reached out to David after I had read the letter, and I said, David, I'm working on this show, which is exactly what you're pointing out. And I sent him the treatment. I'd written down a 3-page. Um, I learned early that the simpler your business plan and your business strategy is for people to consume, the easier it is to kind of progress your idea and move it forward. If you're overcomplicating the message, people tend to just sort of back away and think you're kind of crazy. But I had it down to like a 1-pager on exactly what Electric Playground was going to be, and so I faxed that because I couldn't email it. Email wasn't really happening. Then I faxed it to David, and he read it, and then that was a very formative correspondence with a person. But I reached out to other people as well. Jeff actually was one of the people that we reached out to, Jeff Keighley, who was a writer for a Toronto newspaper at that time. He was 17 or 18 years old, but he was already covering games. But we talked to him about Electric Playground. But I got letters of endorsement and letters of support back from these people, which then became part of our media kit. And then we put together a little demo video. And then I physically would go and meet with broadcasters. So we went to the television convention called NATP, which is kind of like E3, the Electronic Entertainment Exposition for games. There's a TV thing for syndicating shows called NATP. We went to that over the course of a few years, had connections with different broadcasters across Canada. I physically drove down with friends to go and visit our first station that signed on the commitment letter was a broadcaster out of Bellingham called KVOS, a standalone TV station. And they said, yes, we'll take the TV show. And so from there, it kind of snowballed. We started to get some sponsors and some partners to kind of bring our first season together, even though I and most of the people that I had surrounded myself with to build the show had never produced anything. And it really shows in those early seasons how green we were. But when I look back at them, and you can watch them on our YouTube channel, you can watch these first seasons where it's just a bunch of people that never had made TV before, but we were breaking all the rules and, just having like sheer joy building this content, visiting people that hadn't really been on TV before, getting them in front of the camera doing silly things. And they were also having a tremendous amount of joy. And it was infectious. People were watching the show, rated really high right from the beginning, and people were like, wow, this is a very different way to talk about this medium and to talk about creativity.
And one of the things that you were doing, and I remember very clearly because was the thing that caught my eye, was that you were bringing the concept of games to life using special effects in real life, in real time while you were doing the interview. So you were bringing elements of the games in the middle of the interview while you were doing the interview. And you were also doing like small, short movies that were related to the game itself. I remember, I think that was the N64 Indiana Jones and Infernal Machine when you were playing Indiana Jones. Was
Yes.
amazing. I mean, I hope that you're gonna be able to find that reel so we can send it. We can edit it on top of this video because it's truly amazing. And for
Oh,
a TV
thanks.
show that was from like 10, 15, 20 years ago that was talking about
Yep.
games, I wish we had something similar right now for the kind of gaming content that is produced right now on YouTube. It was highly entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like there's still room in the, it's a very crowded space, our media consumption space, but I still feel like we tapped into something really special that didn't waste people's time. That 23 minutes of content that we put together every week and then every day is a pretty small amount of time to pack as much stuff as we did, but we didn't
Yeah,
squander that. We really felt like let's make something special and memorable. And I sometimes would get into situations where I would talk with PR people at game companies, and they would just want to set us up in a room in front of a TV, and we just talk to a game developer. And I said, "Well, look, we can do that, or we can get a whole bunch of you guys all together, and we'll go out into a field and get into a lightsaber battle. And I bet you that people will remember that segment a lot more than us just sitting in front of this television set." And so I actually would have people. They would obviously go along with that because I was pretty persuasive. But then they would call and apologize and say, "Yeah, you were absolutely right, man. That was an amazing segment." And it's just so much fun when they see, you know, this kind of silliness erupt out of the formal setting of a just back and forth type interview, especially when we're talking about a medium that is just filled with so much imagination. But one of the things that I really miss because of the pandemic is that idea of externalizing this conversation and it's such a sedentary form of entertain. Almost all of our favorite entertainment is. It's just so passive, and we're just sort of sitting back and relaxing into it. There's a little bit more, physicality in VR and AR, but there's something quite wonderful about bringing the expression of passion for that stuff out of the comfort of a studio space
yeah.
and being outside or being, you know, physicalizing it, and whether that be in costumes or effects or whatever. It's a fun way to enjoy it, just like cosplay at fan conventions.
So you've got this world of video games, which obviously has kind of formed the basis of your career and kind of the work that you've been doing. When we start
Yep.
looking at the world of extended reality, so virtual reality, augmented reality, all of this, this world, and also the word metaverse, and all of these different things that kind of surround that right now. What are your thoughts on this? Where are you seeing it go? I mean, in terms of where you are kind of taking the future of video games as well, and going from there.
Well, it's interesting how threaded it all is. Like, I think the work that's been going on in games, all of the effort to try to simplify and bring more and more people and engage them and kind of embrace them and their sort of tastes and their sensibilities to bring more and more players into the gaming sphere is going to directly inform a lot of the UI and a lot of uh, the ways that people will onboard into the metaverse. The gamification that we've been talking about in commercials and in exercise equipment and all kinds of stuff over the last 20 years. That is directly going to be a part of the way that we experience the metaverse. We're going to walk through 3D space. We're going to see little icons popping up, rewarding us with all kinds of data and information and exclusives. We're going to have pop up windows giving us information and guide points and all of these things that the game designers have been working on, essentially creating, you know, variations of the theme of a metaverse over and over and over again, excluding this idea of, putting on some kind of wearable thing on our face, and losing ourselves in some kind of a virtual reality type space. So I think games are essential in the future of the metaverse and the future of the VR AR experience. But I also think there's some incredible lessons that games have learned in some ways the hard way. And this is speaking from somebody that has really spent his career trying to um, stimulate the conversation around video games and get more people to care about them and to get more people thinking about them and talking about them as an artistic means of expression. because there has been this disposability around video games, and the industry itself is also guilty of that, where we are always looking to the new and we're forgetting the old, and we see that over and over again with the lack of backwards compatibility. But the other thing that I am acutely aware of too in video games is that this reductive console war that has been a huge part of this business since the Sega Nintendo battle of the late 80s and 90s, all kind of a marketing spin up, as if there isn't room for people that sell millions of something next to somebody that sells, multiple millions more. There's room on the board out there for all of this stuff, but everybody was always pitted against each other. And we still do that between Sony and Nintendo and Xbox to this day. But the thing that makes me very concerned about the future of the metaverse is the idea of competing metaverses. One, that's just insane. Like the the idea that we've got my metaverse over here and we've got my metaverse over, like if it isn't all integrated and um, agnostic and the same type of experience no matter what piece of technology you use to access it, then we're making big mistakes. But the other thing that's happening too, obviously, are these technological sort of walled gardens. And the perfect example is what's going on with the Meta Quest 2 and the PlayStation VR, which I think arguably are the two most mass market friendly VR headsets that you can get currently. Like their lowest barrier to entry in terms of cost, and the software is pretty damn incredible on both of them. But they don't really integrate in terms of there's some crossover from third party game makers like the folks that make Beat Saber and Pistol Whip and stuff like that. Although Beat Saber's owned by Oculus now, but I just wish that there was a lot more um, threading in that content. And so you would see things like for example, yesterday in preparation for this conversation today, I threw on the PlayStation VR and played some Wipeout Omega Collection, and that's arguably one of the strongest examples of a VR arcade experience that you can get in the home. It's so exhilarating and so wonderfully put together.
My favorite
But
VR
you can't.
game ever. I mean, it's
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
hands down
incredible.
my
You put
favorite
yourself
game.
in the you put yourself in the cockpit view, and you feel like you're sitting in a $50,000 VR center machine. Like people would pay a premium if they knew that that was out there. But because there are all these walled gardens, there is this, it's like you got to go in this exclusive club, and then you got to go in this exclusive club, and then you got to figure out what this is. And so just like we saw in the console war, there is this constant kind of cutting off of audience and cutting off of access to this great content, and making players make choices about where they're going to get this stuff. Like it's insane to me that Iron Man VR, which is one of the strongest VR experiences if you're a comic nerd, is only available on a machine that's tethered using 2004 technology or whatever with the PlayStation Move controllers. And the minute you turn your head, the sensors are all broken, and your Iron Man is flapping around, flying around in space. That should be a perfect fit on Oculus Quest and or Meta Quest 2. And we see Sony making some really interesting moves with their first party software. Like they're bringing Uncharted. Like I'll be able to play, I've got the Steam Deck, I'll be able to play Uncharted on the Steam Deck soon. Right now I can play Horizon Zero Dawn on the Steam Deck, but I can't play Iron Man VR, and I can't play Wipeout or Astrobot Rescue Mission on the Oculus Quest, and vice versa. There's some Quest stuff that you can't play on PlayStation. So I think with regards to games, there is an incredible amount of learning in terms of interface and stimulation and reward and engagement that games have learned and are continuing to learn, um, that the metaverse and VR and AR will benefit from. But I also think that there's some bad moves that games have done that VR and AR should absolutely learn from. And honestly, I feel like that's what games are doing right now. The flat screen games are doing right now. They're opening up the access to this content. They're letting people play on through streaming and on a multitude of different devices
Yeah.
and They're figuring out emulation. They're going back into back catalogs. They're doing streaming services or subscription services to make it a little bit more consumer friendly. The Steam Deck is completely repairable.
And
There's a lot
hackable.
of these things and hackable. Yeah, there's a lot of these things where it's like, yeah, okay, let's open this up a little bit. Let's not close our doors. The fact that Sony's first party stuff is on PC is incredibly significant. The fact that we keep hearing that Xbox wants to put Game Pass on Nintendo or Sony systems is incredibly significant.
And
And
Steam.
and Steam, yeah. And the other thing, and I've been thinking about this too, is like we have finally moved back to uh finally with this generation back to kind of 60 frames per second baseline experience on 2D screens. And so we're back into the and above. So there's 120 frames per second. So the games industry kind of started at that, had a language that they learned, but it was kind of exclusive to the people that were into games. But it was a pretty rock solid thing. Then we dipped back down to 30 as we got into 3D technology. And it was okay, but there was lots of issues that we could have had, especially looking back at that content with its eternal quality. And now we're going back into 60 and above, and that's kind of way more visceral, alive experience. And the flood of content, even throughout this pandemic has been great, but this year it feels like all bets are off. Like the hardware is running at full steam. It's really incredible. Even in this past month, I've been like floored by the quality of the game software that I've had. And meanwhile, the VR industry is still tackling its technology, right? It's still kind of figuring out how to get us to 4K displays at 120 hertz, 120 frames per second, solid frame rates, great head tracking. I was playing Quest 2 and PSVR yesterday, and I guess what I'm saying is we in the metaverse and in VR and AR, it needs to tackle the technological stumbles as quickly as possible.
But it seems that the new PlayStation VR 2 is going to solve this. I
Yes,
mean, with eye tracking,
I think
foveated
so.
rendering, better tracking, just one single cable. To be honest with you and to brutally frank with you, the fact that the PlayStation 5 has a Wi-Fi 6 antenna embedded in the machine, I kind of hope that they're going to make like a wireless adapter very soon as well, as an add-on eventually, exactly
They
like
might.
exactly like they
Yeah.
did with support for the Airlink on the Oculus on the Meta Quest 2.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that it's happening. It's getting there. It's getting there. And
Yeah.
obviously
Yes.
Microsoft is doing huge things when it comes to platforms like Altspace and you have Mesh for Teams that is going to be obviously part of the enterprise transformation that they're doing, obviously linked up to Office 365. But if you think about how games became mainstream in the 80s, was through
Yeah.
personal computers that were in people's houses because they were working with those personal computers. So if you
Yes.
think about what Microsoft is doing right now, and in the position of Microsoft on the market to dominate the metaverse with the acquisition of Blizzard and Activision, and obviously the Bethesda acquisition, and what they're doing with Mesh for Teams, which is like embedding immersive experiences inside Teams, which is basically a Trojan horse for them to go on every platform and inject some VR experiences. I mean, they're pretty well positioned to be one of the key players on the market. A lot of people believe that Meta and it's Meta with the pivot of Facebook towards the metaverse is going to dominate the industry. But let's not forget that Microsoft has a massive know-how.
It's about content. Yeah.
It's a massive know-how with about immersive with HoloLens. And they've been one of the first about driving that kind of experience. They now have a very strong content proposition with a Game Pass that potentially will be ubiquitous and platform agnostic.
Right.
And they're going to put a nice bow on top of that. pushing people to use immersive technologies at work so they can get familiar with that at work because they have to. And then obviously it's
Yeah.
going to be for them pretty seamless to use that kind of stuff when they're going to play and they were going to run games.
This is an interesting question though, because you've got Microsoft who have pushed heavily into the augmented reality world, but not necessarily so
Yeah.
much into especially the hardware side of VR, rather, relying on their same model they use for PCs or laptops, where, manufacturers will then utilize the systems that they're building to do that. But the question is it actually going to prove useful, Microsoft going this route, or like this, or where you look at Sony going the route of being a first party manufacturer there and keeping the hardware with themselves as well? Because it's also, I mean, interesting when you look at this and you look at the hardware markets, especially when it comes to consoles, right? I think, you've got countries in Asia, for example, that are hugely, massively pushing forward on at-home consumer sales on this kind of stuff, and then you have
Yeah.
companies like Microsoft who've only ever sold, I think it's like 20 million consoles in total of the entire of their career in Japan, compared to their dominating kind of consoles from Nintendo and PlayStation. So yeah, it's an
Well, I think
interesting
they're looking.
question.
Yeah, they're looking at, I think, Netflix, right? They're looking at the market cap of Netflix and the power of Netflix being totally agnostic and available everywhere and sort of system independent, um, and being this juggernaut out there. And I think Game Pass is that Trojan horse, just like you were saying, Nick. I think that this is, um, and it won't matter if you own the rights to all of these intellectual assets. It won't matter if people's predilection is virtual reality or augmented reality or holographic reality. They're going to want those brands. They're going to want those experiences and those the flavors of that content. And Microsoft is this factored into the decision, I'm sure, on the Activision board side. Not to mention all of the um, troubles that they've been facing as a corporation. But I think they saw the writing on the wall that this is a battle of the $1 trillion businesses out there. And I don't know if Meta is
Yep.
going to weather all of this. Like they've been making some excellent investments in technology and in content. But I don't know if they're positioned in quite the same way that Microsoft is, and eventually Apple will be as well, right?
Yeah, I think there's something interesting that while I've been listening to you convey some of this stuff, especially when we're talking about the video games industry and then talking about this fairly newer metaverse kind of space. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of people that I've spoken to in the past, and when they talk about the video games industry, really speak about it as something still very new. A lot of people I
Yeah.
speak to still feel this sense of, this is a really fresh industry, this is still really new, especially when you compare it to other kind of technologies or industries that have been around for literally forever. um
Yeah.
but I'm interested to know how the parallels of this space in XR might be to the same growth trajectory in terms of development of the industry might relate to XR. And I give an example of the fact that a lot of people that work in immersive technologies have come across or jumped across from the games industry because that
Yes.
experience from a development perspective is needed. But you've been in this space long enough to see how it has changed over the last kind of 30 years we established.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, what are some of those parallels you think we actually might see come across into this space, and also more importantly, what some people may have learned to not bring across as well?
Well, it is a sophisticated business for sure, and um, one of the things that I've definitely witnessed is the scale up in resources that it takes to build entertainment that really moves the needle. Um, and also the industry continually work hard to lower the barrier to entry, whether that's free to play experiences, service games, thinking about the mass proliferation of a brand, sort of launching on a bunch of different machines at the same time. And I don't think you can think about a virtual anything, a virtual creation of anything, whether it's a VR promotional experience or the full-on idea of the metaverse, without looking at game developers who, first and foremost are just brilliant people. Because the thing that people don't really, still to this day, really understand about games is that they are built from scratch, all of it. A little bit of learnings and a little bit of lessons and sometimes some carryover code. And now there are, pretty extensive game engines and stuff. But the idea that a game is going to come out and sort of do well in the marketplace is really about its reinvention, about coming out and showing the world how clever this team was at taking tools and assets and things and experiences that they've had before, but making it completely fresh from ether and building it. It's not like the movie industry where there's a common language and some scenic designers can move from the 1880s to working on Dune or whatever, like everybody's using the same types of camera technology. It's all crafted from scratch, and so that mind share, that experience in gaming is going to transfer one to one with wherever the roads to the metaverse kind of lead, and I think the the sort of pitfalls that have happened with the gaming industry as well, because there have been overextensions, there have been miscalculations on people's adoption on technology and people's ideas around games. And so I've seen a lot of studios come up with great ideas, great concepts that for whatever reason just didn't reach the marketplace the way that they wanted to. And, there's a myriad of different reasons. I think, yeah, the education that the gaming developers have got with trying to create these really esoteric ideas and concepts and then make them palatable to someone just picking up a controller or a mouse and being able to navigate through 3D space. That's unbelievable. It's incredible what they've been able to accomplish there. And same goes for the VR pioneers as well, right? Because they have been all working their butts off trying to figure out a commonality in language and letting people engage with their software to varying degrees of success over this time. So
The
yeah, I
VR.
think that there's incredible lessons that can be learned there. But there's also been a lot of missteps, and I'm hoping for the metaverse's sake and for the future of the VR and the AR technology and that medium's sake that um, they can look at the missteps and the mistakes and get beyond them as quickly as possible. And I think one of the biggest ones is this walled garden, like this exclusivity. The idea that any VR software comes out and it's exclusive to a platform is incredibly detrimental, especially if we're talking about a metaverse.
There are some obviously some efforts to create a common language and an easy portability of the experiences from one hardware to the other. Uh,
Yeah,
but I believe that is not much about the difficulty of bringing experiences from one hardware to the other, or the interoperability between the different platforms of the metaverse that right now is being kind of tackled by the Open Metaverse Consortium that includes all the major platforms. They're trying to find a common way to port assets from one platform to the other, so your avatar remains the same. You can bring your own assets from one platform to the other, and so on. I believe
yeah,
that the biggest problem is probably linked to the exclusivity that is aimed to promote that specific kind of hardware or that specific kind of
hardware.
platform.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's more about a business decision problem rather than a technological problem or a software problem. So it's
totally.
probably kind of
Yes,
a business mindset that
yes.
probably needs to shift to embrace a more open of business vision, like for example what Netflix is doing that is present on every kind of platform, and what Microsoft,
Yeah,
for example, is trying to do of pushing Game Pass on every platform. I think that I remember I read somewhere that they would even be on the PlayStation if they could. So
yeah, yes, yeah,
it's crazy, and right now, especially with everything that is happening in the field of streaming and game streaming, I mean, this could be easily overcome every kind of technological hurdle, because at the end of the day, if you have the computation in the cloud, you can literally be on any device. And
Yes.
that's the inevitable future. But for now, we are locked
Yes.
into specific kind of exclusivity. But let's not
Yes.
forget that there are also some platforms like Disney Plus that are, very happy about having their Mandalorian and their Book of Boba Fett and all of
Right.
their exclusive TV shows that obviously are making consumers to choose one platform instead of the other. So
I think
what?
there's a difference though between the receptacle that you experience that material on and the studio vertical that's making that content and wants to recoup on that. And so hardware is that complicated issue that has stymied the video game industry from real explosive growth. And let's face it, I mean, we really haven't seen explosive growth in games until mobile came into the space and became this sort of de facto, everybody has the same type of screen with them at all times. There's a way to monetize games in lots of different flavors for these different devices. The console model and the exclusive hardware model that the games industry kind of set up, and this idea that it's around for 5 years and then it goes away and all of that library isn't useful anymore on this new thing, it doesn't make sense going forward because the portability of content that the mobile space has sort of shown the world and people have the generations now have grown up with, that's what they want, and that's what Microsoft is responding to. PlayStation is about to respond to that. Nintendo is kind of responding to that, I think, even with Nintendo's software online, and I think the VR AR industry needs to do that as well, and I really believe that if Sony is like very serious about the future of the medium, and I know they are, but I really believe that they should be partnering with the other biggest players. They should be partnering with Meta and saying, okay, well, let's share that content. Let's figure out a way so that our users can have access back and forth with all of this material. I don't know what that means, but locking things up hardware wise has not served the video game industry well. Because like Nintendo has always made good systems, but the Wii U didn't sell hardly at all, because people just weren't onto the hardware. So all of the people that invested in software in that direction lost out, got scared. And consequently, when the Switch came out and it became a massive success, there were still a lot of third-party publishers that were like, I don't know, man, last one didn't work well. So let's wait and see if people actually buy this thing before we commit any development resources to making stuff for the Switch. And it's that hardware gamble, which unfortunately, we are in a technologically forward conversation here. We're talking about companies making these expensive bets on hardware to kind of push these ideas forward. But I think that's also been the real limitation. And the other things too about VR and AR is um, the awkwardness of the technology has got to improve as well. Like it's too heavy on
Mm.
most people's faces. I think that I don't know the statistics, but I think that men and women sort of connect with virtual reality in a different way.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, we can also talk about one other challenge, and this is, and as a someone who is an advocate for the virtual reality industry and the immersive industry as a whole,
yeah,
my
yeah,
my my biggest challenge when I find, especially games. Okay, so XR for work for me, it's a game changer. I can do a lot of stuff that I've never been able to do. But the
yeah,
challenge that I always face in particular, and I know that there's a lot of other people out there, is I play video games to relax,
yeah.
right?
Yes, yeah,
So much so that I play video games only exclusively, mainly single player, because I like to go at my own pace. Um, but the biggest challenge is right is XR or VR in general is quite a physically demanding experience.
yes, yes,
Right? Especially if I find there's some experiences we have where we have to stand up, right? And you have to, I'm in my living room and I'm standing up and I'm like, sometimes I just want to almost veg out, sit down on the sofa and just kind of chill. But
totally.
even with some experiences that you have, even if they don't require you to move a lot, you're still having to exert a lot of physical energy with these devices on your face. So it's going to be interesting to see how developers maneuver around this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that has created a cottage industry for a lot of fitness video games, and I have a lot of friends that have been in the games industry for a long time that are always talking about their daily VR workouts and how much joy that and honestly, some of the most successful VR games have been things like Pistol Whip and Beat Saber,
Mm.
like qualitatively and quantity. You look at those beautifully crafted pieces of software; they are exceptional onboarding
Oh no,
experiences.
they're
Like you put
brilliant. I have an experience where I literally I've moved into a new apartment and I just started speaking to my neighbors upstairs, and before you know it, 1 week later I go up to have a coffee and we're playing Pistol Whipped, um,
it's
and
amazing.
yeah, I know it was a eye opener for them as well, and a really great way for me to introduce them to the tech.
But you're right. I think that some of the more traditional video game experiences in VR are incredible. Like we talked about Wipeout, and that's one where you can actually sit down. Your senses are alive because you're looking around inside of this cockpit that's hurtling at hundreds of miles an hour down. This anti gravity vehicle that's just whipping and trying to blast at enemies and stuff. But you can also look at Sony's incredible Astrobot Rescue Mission for the
Mm,
PlayStation VR, which is a traditional platformer, but it's so intelligently made in VR because it puts you as a character into the game and you're actually using your head to hit obstacles because you're thrust into this 3D world and you're actually moving your little robot character behind you and looking around and but it's all using that language of 3D platformers that we've been engaged
mm.
in for decades. And Moss is like that as well. Moss is an amazing game like that. And another really great one is Lucky's Tale, which was a launch title for the Oculus Rift, which has just come out for Oculus Quest 2. And that also evoked a different era. But the difference is that you're the camera. You with the headset on, looking around, and it's amazing. And the only thing that I think holds people back is well, there's a couple things. It's the isolation of VR. It is the awkwardness of VR. Some people have some motion sickness with it. Um, of the it's the weight of the headsets. I think is that's really got to come down.
Mm.
Like the way it feels on faces. And there's lots of ways to balance it out, and you can make it super comfortable, but you have to keep finding the external things to attach to the headset to make it super comfortable. And most people just don't have that patience.
Yeah, but that's also something really key that you just said, which is really important. There is the games themselves, right? They can't just be ports of
Yeah.
normal PC versions or console versions. They need to be intelligently designed to utilize the medium of XR, right?
Yes, they do. But I also think that, and through no fault of these clever developers out there, and they're experimenting. We're still in the experimental phase of virtual reality. What are we? We're like almost 10 years into this new era of VR again, and people are still figuring out. The direct analogy is we moved from 2D to 3D games, and those early 3D games on the PlayStation 1 and the Nintendo 64, there was a lot of crap. There was a lot of stuff where it was like, this does not work, this camera does not work, this is just not fun to play. And I think we've got similar things happening in VR. And so you go into the various stores that offer VR equipment, and there's a lot of test software, it feels like, or slivers of cool ideas, but not really fully fleshed out things. So, my thinking as a consumer of this stuff and as a critic of this stuff is that eh, I think that the bigger bets are worth it. So I think that thinking of IP that's already familiar with people and not squandering it at like the terrific camouflage game Iron Man, the Iron Man VR game, not on great hardware. It didn't work on the PlayStation VR, but the experience of being Iron Man in that game was amazing. And I think that that's really a great move on the part of the VR purveyors and the VR developers to think about what IP will work. Yes, you have to
Mm.
make it be a VR experience. Wipeout is an unbelievable example. Unfortunately, Wipeout is a it demands a lot of the player. You can't sleep through. You have to be really engaged and really into it, and you're going to have an amazing experience in something like that. But I also think Star Wars Squadrons was a really fantastic, you know, realization of flying around on an X-wing. I think Resident Evil 4 in VR on Oculus Quest 2 was a very successful enterprise, and I fully believe that they need to be VR experiences, but they need to be full real games. And I think it behooves the medium right now to think of brands that people are familiar with. And so when they go into these cluttered, crowded stores with lots of, you know, sample platter ideas of concepts that do some work and some don't, the brands will stick out and get people ushered into thinking, okay, well, I'll spend some money and try that. I'll put that on my headset and we'll see if that, and if those are good, and a lot of them have been. I think there's been some successful Star Wars titles. Res being redone in 3D was
which is
amazing. Tetris
phenomenal.
Effect, it's such a classic, and Tetris Effect in VR is insane. Uh, we need. I, I I hate to bang the drum of licensed stuff, but I think that the medium benefits from it. I really do. And I also feel like developers would love to have their crack at making games in these spaces as well, not just for the monetary benefits, but also for the creative win of working on like I played Resist, which is a really cool game. I forget the name of I think it's the Brothers or something. I can't remember. Really cool game on Oculus Quest 2, where you kind of feel like Iron Man fused with Spider-Man, and you're shooting at things with bullet time. So it's like a Matrix Iron Man Spider-Man thing, and it's really cool. But it's like I would love an awesome Insomniac caliber Spider-Man game, and if Sony's they playing their cards right, I'm sure that that's what they're doing. Insomniac has this amazing experience in VR gaming already. I'm sure we're going to get a VR Spider-Man experience when the PlayStation VR 2 comes out. But I want that. And so games that borrow from Tron or Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or Dune or whatever, but aren't those, they're kind of neat, but they're not serving the growth of the platform and the growth of this concept, as well as if those real actors and those real characters and those real licensed elements were a part of these experiences.
I have a provocative question, and this is the
Yeah.
the usual Nick's provocative question that I throw in every time that we do a podcast. Do you think that the physicality and the visceral experience of VR is in contrast to the usual knowledge
Player.
that virtual reality should be something that you do on your couch while having snacks and to relax? And that's why this is a problem for VR gaming to really break through.
I don't think I think the challenge is that we haven't had the software that really makes it worth it. You know,
Okay.
we haven't had enough of it. There is some software where, like, Beat Saber is a perfect example.
Yep.
Beat Saber is a quintessential virtual reality experience. If you don't have Beat Saber on your VR device because it's available on anything, you're kind of missing out. You're missing out on the most straightforward, perfect example of what makes VR fun. And it's bite sized. You can play it for as long as you want, be obsessed with it as much as you want, share it with friends, play it online. So is some software, but we don't have enough of it, and it's not just going to be a gimmick. It's not just going to be um uh it's got to be rooted in the fundamental kind of creation of it. But if it's
Yeah.
worth it, like the Star Wars games with the lightsaber stuff, like the Darth Vader Immortal, and there's been a couple other Star Wars with lightsabers. They've been pretty good, but they haven't been one to one. They haven't been it almost feels like we need to, in addition to making the headsets lighter, we need to have more tactile haptic feedback in the controls themselves, so that when somebody picks up a sword or a lightsaber, like let's say somebody made
It's
an
going to be
awesome
present
Conan
in
game.
PlayStation VR 2. they're going to
Yeah,
implement the
right.
DualSense in the controllers, which is going to be, I believe, is
Yeah,
going to be
I'm
unbelievable. It's
very
going to be
excited
awesome.
about PSVR 2. The thing that sort of holds me back a bit in getting super overwhelmed with excitement about PSVR 2 is that they can't make enough PlayStation 5s to fill the market. And so how the hell are they going to make enough PSVR 2? And then also when you think about the cost equation and all of that, that's like $800 worth of hardware money, you know, and is it going to be y- and if we look at the last, it's 6 years, right, since the last one. Are we expecting that PSVR 2 is going to be cool for 5 6 years worth of time? I hope it is. That's the other thing too, right? Like the video game industry it's not plateauing, but now that we've hit that 60 frames, 120 frames per second, flat screen, 16 by 9, or in PC case you can play 21 by 9 monitors or whatever. There is this predictability for the spec that developers need to build for, but VR is still like if PSVR 2 comes out and it's a very successful piece of technology, you know that Meta is going to try to one up that and bring it in at a lower cost and make it hands free. And then if they do that, then somebody else is going to try to come in and do this. So I think VR is in that mobile space where they're still kind of adding features and trying to keep the price as low as possible and get into as many homes as they possibly can. And and uh, and so there's going to be this moving target on the best experience, on where it is. And whereas in the console space, like the gap between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 is infinitesimal. It's so small. And even
Yeah.
like top of the line PCs, it's not that much of a improvement comparative to the top consoles right now, and then if DLSS technology comes into play with Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever, there's going to be this kind of parity that's happening where you're going to have this kind of key core experience, but in VR it can be very different depending on where you go with all this. And it's this technological race. And so yeah, I'm questioning that too, right? Like we need to get to ubiquity in terms of experience and parity in terms of experience. Price needs to come down, weight needs to come down, needs to be 100% not going to make anybody motion sick. The tracking has to be perfect, the hand tracking has to be perfect, there has to be physicality within the feedback for the game experience, and the software needs to be a taste of the familiar, but also be expressly different from what we would get in 2D. And none of those asks are small, but we're getting there.
So what's in the future of VR in just 1 minute, because we have to close this episode, unfortunately.
What's in the future of VR? Um, I, gosh, well, that's such a big question. I think it is all that. I think the future of VR is technology that's uh, very similar across the board, and it'll be very lightweight and very much y- like right now. There's quite a bit of frustration adjusting things and fitting things and testing and tuning and tweaking things and augmenting things to make it comfortable. And I think that's the future of VR is comfort and experience, like the gap from putting something on and having a mind altering experience is just going to shrink and shrink and shrink, and it's just going to keep getting more mind blowing.
Amazing. I mean, I personally can't wait for that future. And I think, like one of the really interesting things, and also for those of you at home as well that are listening to this, is, having seen some of the submissions of games come through with the VR awards year on year, and to see like Demio, for example, Game of the Year last year as well.
Demio's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it won Game of the Year at the VR awards last year. I mean, all of these kind of things I honestly can't wait to see what's in store for us for this year as well, especially as the hardware continues to evolve and change. So exciting stuff.
And we
Yeah.
hope to have you for the next edition of the VR Awards in London.
In person, yeah, with physical
In
event.
person.
You've got to be
I would
there.
I would absolutely love to be there. That would be amazing. I'd love to, say hello to all of the incredible VR developers from around the world. And I think said some things that may have come off like I'm frustrated or disappointed in VR, but it blows me away. I'm the converted. I just like in the early days of video game coverage, with my show, I wanted more people to know how awesome it is, and I feel that way about VR and AR and this idea of the metaverse. Um, but yeah, there's some big lessons that community can learn from the video game industry for sure.
Amazing. Victor, it's been a real pleasure having you on this episode of Field of View. Thank you so much for being with us.
My absolute pleasure. I was honored to be here, you guys. Thank you so much.
So then,
Amazing.
shall we remind about this episode and the platforms where our users can find us?
I was going to say, this is the moment where people just about switch off the podcast as they're pulling up into park. But don't go just yet, because in terms of this episode and stuff, you can obviously watch this on YouTube. You can find this on any podcasting platform you have. And also, if you did get to this, there's just a little treat for those who got to the very end as well. There's a little 10% discount code as well for any nomination or tickets to the VR Awards this year as well. So make sure to claim that as well if you're interested.
And don't forget to press like if you like this button, or dislike if you didn't like it, and subscribe if you want to get notification for the next episode of Field of View. And also, please check out all the beautiful, wonderful episodes of EPN that Victor is rolling out on YouTube very often, by the way. I'm impressed by how proficient you are in producing all those episodes. And again, Vic, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a true treat having you.
My pleasure, you guys. Hope to see you both in person very soon.
Thank you. Bye. Cheers.
Amazing.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Through accessible insights, a solid network of support, and recognizing truly outstanding achievements near or far. Big or small, we're in this together. AIXR.